The Observer.
Lots of politicians write political memoirs, normally self-serving or nonsense. Liz Truss, 10 Years to Save the West, I think hers was called. But this is different. This is about Ed's life as a carer, and it's an extraordinary story, deeply personal, very moving and really inspiring. And I think out of all the politicians I've interviewed over the years, Ed Davey's the one whose perception has changed the most my perception of him has changed the most during the interview, because he had an image when he was in the coalition as a minister, as a rather sort of serious, dull, maybe a little bit stuffy as a minister. Then now he's got this sort of, total wipeout, bungee jumping, diving into water at every opportunity. But actually, what came across in the interview, and that comes across in the book as well, is he's had this extraordinary set of traumas and tragedies and setbacks in his life, where his father died when he was 4, then his mother was diagnosed with cancer when he was 10, and he cared for her until she died when he was 15. And now he has a disabled son, John, who's 17, and his wife, Emily, as well. They care for John together, but she also has multiple sclerosis. So it's an extraordinary series of difficult things he's overcome. But Ed, what really strikes me in the book and talking to you over the years is you don't see it like that, do you? You don't see it as trauma and tragedy and setbacks. It's almost like you don't think of yourself as unlucky.
No, because I was very fortunate to be loved by my family, by my mum, and although my dad passed when I was very early, I still feel his love in the legacy he gave. I adore my son. Didn't mention I looked after my nana who looked after me after my parents had died, and then I looked after her when she was elderly, and I had a very close relationship with her. So I do think I've been quite fortunate, but I know the caring is tough, right? So you can have wonderful relationships, but there's no point in sugarcoating the pill. It can be pretty tough. And what I've tried to do in the book is the first 3 chapters are about my experience, but there's then 4 chapters about other people's experience, because I'm really clear from the work I've done in my constituency and going around talking to many different carers of all shapes and sizes. Caring is very, very unique for the circumstances that you are caring in. And the 4 carers who've written wonderful chapters in the book, one's a young carer looking after her autistic brother, another is a wonderful elder gentleman looking after his wife with dementia, another is a mother looking after her son with mental health problems, another was a young woman who actually was looking after her mum with alcohol and mental health problems when she was 4 or 5, and then looked after her till she could escape because her mother was abusing her. And I wanted to have all those types of stories in to show the different types of care. And when I compare myself to other people who've had caring responsibilities, I know how lucky I am. And I'm also fortunate that I had a privileged education. We weren't wealthy by any stretch of the imagination, but we knew where the next meal was coming from, and we had a roof over our heads. And some people who have to care aren't financially fortunate either. So I wanted to use my own experience to be the voice for those people who don't have a voice and who've had different caring responsibilities, and then draw that into sort of the policy debate as a politician. But maybe we shouldn't. We'll talk about that later.
Well, I was wondering why your identity as a carer is so important to you, and whether it actually informs how you are as a politician.
Well, the truth is, I didn't talk much about it publicly until I became leader, when people started asking me questions about who are you and what's your life been. It was very much there, of course it was. And I did some campaigning for bereaved children, and some campaigning in my area for carers. I call it, in the technical world, they call them unpaid carers. I think that's just not a great phrase. I call them family carers, and people looking after their loved ones. And so I'd had that experience, but I only really started to explore it and talk about it when I was asked. And then, and it was a little bit uncomfortable to start off with, particularly talking about my son, and I had to talk to my wife about what we would say about my son, because he unfortunately, he'll never have the autonomy and the ability to say, I don't mind being talked about. So we had to make the decision for him. And we've worked out what we are prepared to say about him and what we're not, and where the line is, and it can be tricky. So I've been on a journey talking about care, and so it's become more of my political personality, if you like. It's always there, but it's become more of my sort of public persona. And I've been encouraged by the response we've had when I've talked about it. And I mean, actually, it wasn't my idea to write the book. It was HarperCollins, so thank you, HarperCollins. My team had the idea of our party election broadcast telling my story and talking about care. And as I've been on this journey in the last few years, what I've noticed is several things. First of all, how many people respond and want me to talk about care. And either say, you've told my story, or can I tell you my story of caring? And when you look at the numbers, 7, 8 million family carers out there, that's a huge number. And then when you look at the policy implications, whether it's the informal carers propping up social care or propping up the NHS, and then you say, well, how do we rescue the NHS and social care? Well, you've got to start with family carers. And so my policy thoughts have sort of developed, quite bizarrely really, from telling my story, getting a response from people, and thinking, well, actually, maybe I need to keep talking about this, and not least to keep care on the agenda, because it's getting a bit political at the moment. Since 1997, there have been 25 commissions, reviews, select committee inquiries into social care, and we haven't sorted it.
There's another one now.
There's another one now. And the ability of politicians to kick the can down the road is there for all to see, and we just can't do it anymore. So I'm going to keep talking about care. Whether it's a Christmas single, tried number 1, we weren't successful. You still download it, Love Is Enough, or the book, or PMQs. I want to keep making sure it's part of our political dialogue, and I'm not going to let the government get away with it. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get some response, but I'm a bit dispirited by the fact that the Casey Commission has a 3-year timetable with an implemented timetable of another 7 years on top of that, so 10 years in total. I mean, that's just not serious.
So I want to stick to your story for a moment, just going back to your childhood. How much do you remember about your dad, and what impact did his death have on you? He wrote you a letter, didn't he, just before he died?
Yeah, which I couldn't read at the time.
Did your mum read it to you?
Yeah, I mean, then she showed me. I mean, the mum's just talking about my father was my main recollections, to be honest, because she wanted us not to, feel sad, but to remember him in positive ways. I only have two very dim recollections of him. I was at nursery school, and he picked me up in the back of the car when he was, a month or two before he died. Mum was driving. So I have this recollection of him in this big, thick trench coat trying to keep warm. And then a dim memory of sitting on his knee. But I really didn't have a relationship with him. But in the way he created his will, with a real focus on our education, his letter.
What did he say in the letter? Tell people.
I'm trying to remember what he said. He basically said, be clever, good, happy. Here's a lot of kisses, and your mummy will give them all to you for me.
And what impact did his death have on your family? It must have been incredibly hard for your mum.
Yeah, she was 34, and she was widowed with 3 boys under the age of 10. My eldest brother was 9, Henry was 7, I was 4. So yeah, it was pretty tough for her. She didn't get on with my father's parents, and that was a bit tricky. So there's always those family issues that just make life that extra bit complicated. And we were living in North Nottinghamshire because my father had come from a sort of mining community. And he was the first of his family to go to university, and he became a solicitor. And he died at 38, but done pretty well in that short period. But we then moved to central Nottingham and began a new life with Mum. And I think it was really tough for her. I mean, I'm not sure if this is even the book, I think I touched on it a little bit. She, in her last 2-3 years, she had a boyfriend. And you can imagine I wasn't super keen on him. But it was her last throw. And I think she realised that it couldn't go. I mean, they did talk about marriage at one time, but that didn't happen. But, you know, she must have been quite lonely for her. It was really tough for her.
Do you remember the diagnosis when she got cancer? How did you find out about that?
Well, it was coming in 2 stages, really. She was originally diagnosed, actually, when I was 9 with breast cancer. And she told all 3 of us separately, and I remember telling me over Christmas, I think I don't know, probably on her bed, chatting, as we often did. And she told me and she was going to have a mastectomy, and but she seemed so calm and reassuring that I then sort of went off and started playing again and didn't think too much of it. I thought it sounded pretty serious, but she was okay about it. And afterwards, she was fine for 2-3 years, and then the cancer went to her bones, secondary breast cancer on her bones, and she told us, I think when I was 12, and it wasn't a surprise because we'd seen her in a bit of pain, and she'd been going to the doctor for a fair bit before it was diagnosed. And she was okay for a period, but then gradually declined. And bone cancer is a very painful cancer, and it was very difficult. And after a while, the NHS, you know, after chemo and radiotherapy, said, we can't do anything else for you. And because she tried everything, she tried naturopathy, she tried laying on of hands, and a whole range of things she tried in order to fight it. And the 8 months when she was having this naturopathy cures was pretty grim. You know, we had to. She was only allowed to have apple juice and carrot juice, and occasionally a bit of cottage cheese. So I had to juice all these carrots and all these apples, try and make her feel this horrible food was going to be okay for her. And she had something called coffee enemas. Believe it or not, this was the. I'm afraid I'm going to call it a quack cure, and loads of vitamin pills. But she was trying everything to fight it, right? Then eventually, of course, it didn't work, and she went back on the NHS for palliative care. And during this time, she was gradually losing mobility, so she was in a wheelchair, and then mostly bedridden, and then dealing with her pain.
So what did it mean for you as a child? How did you have to look after her?
Well, it was myself and my brothers. My oldest brother, though, was obviously some time away in gap year and then at university, so it was Henry and I probably did quite a lot of the care with my nan and granddad, my mum's parents. And we didn't have any carers come in, it was the family, and I would say mainly Henry and myself doing a lot of the caring for a lot of the time. And that was, you know, things like taking mum her medicine or taking mum her food, and actually most important of all, sitting and talking to her and chatting to her and watching TV. And she'd been quite careful with the money because, you know, when you're widowed and you've got 3 boys, and although we weren't badly off, we weren't stressed out, you know, you're obviously careful with the money. And she started spending a bit of money. We went on a few holidays with hotels and swimming pools. And she bought remote control TV, which was fantastic. And we'd watch it on her, I'd sit and watch TV with her, lie on the bed with her. And we got very close.
But you also had a bell jar of morphine in the kitchen, didn't you, that you had to administer?
Yeah, I mean, the pain just got worse and worse. And then at the end, she was having a lot of morphine, and I'm sure they wouldn't allow these bell jars in your kitchen nowadays. And there was one bell jar with the morphine, another with some liquid, which made it sort of easy to drink. And so I'd measure that out and take it to her. She had to do some injections, and then there was this these electric shocks. Now, women who've gone through pregnancy might know that sometimes during labour you give yourself a little mini electric shock with a tenor. Is it called tenor?
Tens machine.
Tens machine, yeah, thank you. It's a bit like that, but a bit more crude. And
So you had to do that?
well, I had to put the pads on her, and then she would administer it herself. So she's in real pain. I mean, her bones were just collapsing.
It must have just been awful to watch as a young boy.
It absolutely was. But interestingly, because I was very close to my mum and had a great relationship, she sort of coached me through it.
Right.
It was worse for her parents, my nan and granddad. I mean, she was their only child. And watching their only child die from their eyes. And my nana was, I mean, they were just in pieces, really.
Did you ever resent it or feel angry that this had happened twice, that it's so unfair that two parents have been so ill?
Well, I wasn't angry about my father because I didn't know my father. So I didn't really know what I'd lost, and Mum protected me from that. So I don't think I felt angry about that. I mean, I would have liked to have known him more. It turned out he was liberal. That's another story I can tell you about that. It's true as well. And I was angry about my mum in one way, but another way, it was over a long period, and she prepared us, and we would talk about taking each day as it comes.
Yeah.
And towards the end, we were being very frank about what was going to happen. So it wasn't a shock. And towards the end, I mean, I was actually by her side when she died, because for the last 2 weeks, she was in Nottingham General Hospital, which is sort of Victorian old hospital. Wasn't the greatest place to be, or certainly wasn't hospice. And she was on a ward with elderly people with dementia, so it wasn't terribly suitable. But anyway, that's what it was.
Pretty upsetting to visit as a boy.
Yeah, but and I was going in the mornings before I went to school,
Yeah.
and I was there, and I sat by her, and then she passed. And the point I was going to make, when you were saying what I was angry, there was a sense of relief. I mean, I was very upset, but there was a sense of relief because she'd been in so much pain, and that you could see from her face it sort of pain went away. The death I was most angry about actually was my granddad.
Right.
Because my granddad died when I was 18, 3 years later.
Okay.
And it was quite sudden from a heart attack. And I was sort of angry, A, because I was very close to my granddad, but also for my nana, because she'd lost her only child and her husband in the space of 3 years. And that just... But I became very close to her. So.
And just when you are a young carer like that, what impact does it have on your life? Because presumably you can't do all the normal teenage things. Are you able to go to the pub with your friends or play sport or all the things that a 14-year-old boy would do? Or actually, maybe not go to the pub.
It's not being recorded.
Well, I mean, it must make you quite isolated, or not.
Well, you're right on one level, but remember it was 12 to 15 when she was sort of terminally ill, and there was a lot of care, and particularly the last 18 months of her life. And I did feel a little bit different from the other boys at school. It was an all-boys school, Nottingham High, and I felt, I mean, part of me felt I was almost bullied, but it wasn't bullied at all. It was just I was different, and I obviously was thinking about Mum and how she was and what happened when I go home. And other boys were thinking about what's in the charts or football or whatever.
So you were maybe more serious?
I was definitely more serious. And I would say, why are you worried about that? Because they were obviously worried about little things, which you are as a teenager going through puberty or whatever. I wasn't so worried about those. I used to play a lot of tennis. It was one of my escapes. But after Mum died, I wouldn't say I went off the rails. I didn't go off the rails, but we lived in a little bungalow at the end of a cul-de-sac, and the one next door neighbours who were close to us, they were both hard of hearing. And so we had a great place of parties. So, I did hold some good parties, and I had a good social life. I had a great social life, to be honest. And if you read, I think it's chapter 2, and you hear about the things I got up to after that, I mean, nothing to get on the front page. But, I had a normal life. I had fun, and, Mum didn't clearly didn't want me to be scarred, and that was the preparation, that was love. That's why I say I'm actually quite fortunate.
Yeah.
You know, had a great school, same school for 10 years, brothers,
But did you have a sense, suddenly you were an orphan?
Well, I didn't think that until my head teacher said that. I mean, I was at school and come back after Mum had died, and the head teacher was a really nice man, right? But he stopped me in the corridor and said, "Davey," you can tell what sort of school it was, "Davey, how are you? I'm sorry to hear about your mother. We've never had orphans before." And that was the first time I'd heard that word used about me.
Right.
And
What did you think?
I thought, I'm not an orphan.
Okay.
And
Why?
Why you?
Because you had your grandparents.
I had grandparents, I had a wonderful mother,
Yeah.
brother. Again, it's the point I'm making that I was lucky, I was loved. And yes, it was awful when I preferred my parents to be here, and that's a no-brainer. But I can now, at this distance, you know, I'm 60 end of this year, I can look back, it was something a long time ago, and see it in perspective. And to bring it to young carers, I meet lots of young carers. I talk about the two in the book, but you meet young carers all over the place, and some of them are going through most amazing things. And one of the serious policy things I would say about young carers is we don't identify them very well. We're better than we were, to be fair, but we don't identify enough of them, and then we don't get to support them properly. And if I was Secretary of State for Education, one of the things I would do is a lot on young carers, and there are groups of other children who are often called ACE children, adverse childhood experience children. So they might have been sexually abused, they might have had other difficulties in their early years. And if we look after those children who've missed out on stable, loving families or had some sort of trauma, I think we would be a happier society and have a more successful performance in education.
Yeah. And when you found out that your son John had severe learning disabilities, how did you realise that was going to be a permanent issue? And did you constantly think, actually, maybe we can make him better, or be able to sort it out?
Oh, all the time. And obviously when your first child is born, you're on cloud 9, and you stay on cloud 9 until you're forced off it. And unfortunately, we were forced off it. We began to think he's not developing as he's supposed to when he was about 3 months, but we thought he was a late developer, and we said that to ourselves at 6 months, and then we had an 8 or 9 month checkup, and they said there's a problem here, global development delay, we're not quite sure what it is, and you need to refer to a consultant paediatrician, and we were, there was a bit of a wait for that, and then they thought it was cerebral palsy, but it's not. He's not diagnosed. We've had multiple tests at Great Ormond Street and various other places, who are some of the best in the world, but we can't give it a name. Basically, his brain, he has a smaller cerebellum in the back of his brain than he should have. His myelin is weak in his brain, and he has less white matter in his brain than he should have. And that results in him not being able to walk, unaided. He can hold his own weight, because we've done a lot of work, which I'll come to in a minute, so he can hold his own weight. But he can't, he'll fall over if he doesn't have an aid. His speaking is very limited. It's a lot better than it was. Again, we could talk about the history of the book, but he can't have a conversation, and he wouldn't really understand what we're saying now. But we can get by and can communicate in John's language and ways. And he has learning difficulties. So he's going to need 24/7 care, essentially, for the rest of his life. And that was a hell of a journey to go on. I guess in those first few years, to come back to your question, we kept thinking he will improve, and it's just a matter of time, and if we do this, and if we try that. And we actually had a Hungarian au pair, Susan, who's one of our first strokes of luck with John, whose father was a GP back in Budapest. And he said, looking at the photographs of John and I think video, said, well, if it's cerebral palsy, he should go to the Peto Institute in Budapest. So the Peto Institute was set up by this guy called Peto after the Second World War. It started off for soldiers who've got brain damage, but then quickly went on to cerebral palsy children, and they do a number of neurological conditions. And we went there, and so John was about 30 months, because we'd been given, by the way, 6-month waiting list for physio, a year waiting list for speech and language, a year waiting list for OT, occupational therapy, and we thought, we'll try something else. And so we followed the Hungarian idea, and 30 months old, we had John in Budapest at the Peto. And we went 3 times a year for the first 5 years. And Emily would write these programs of what the Hungarians were doing. They're called conductors. It's called conductive education. And then she would spend 5 or 6 hours every day, or 6 days out of 7, doing a program for poor John to try to get him to...
Of sort of physical exercises.
Yeah.
And
I mean, she taught him to crawl.
Right.
By 2 years of going down our little hallway in our terrace house at the time, holding his tummy and moving his arm, moving his leg, moving his arm, moving his leg, because it's repetition, it's about reprogramming the brain. That's the theory behind conductive education. And so
what's your life now as a carer for him?
Well, first of all, we still go to the Peto. We've just come back.
Ah, interesting.
So we go once a year now. And we're able to go. This is how lucky we are. Emily's brother and mum help us out financially, because it's not like going to the States, fortunately. Hungary's relatively cheap, and the treatment's relatively cheap, but it's still expensive. So we get help on that. So we go there. But in terms of the caring, well, I tend to get up sort of just before 6, round 6, to go and be the first person that John sees every morning, because he often doesn't see me in the evening. So John and my daughter Ellie see me in the morning. I get John up, which is a relatively slow process. He likes to strum on a guitar. He likes to talk to parrotty, which is this parrot that, if you know, plastic parrot, and you talk to it, it talks back to you, repeats back to you, and he likes that. So we sort of gradually get him going and see what mood he's in.
And he must be big now. He's 17.
17, yeah. But I mean, he's lying on the bed. He can't get up himself. Okay. So I have to help him get up, sit on the edge of the bed, get his awareness, and then I walk him to the bathroom, which is specially adapted, take his nappy off, take him a shower, wash him every morning, and all that stuff, to his teeth. Now we have a living carer, again, thanks to our family and friends helping us. So at that stage now, I will hand over to the carer, who will then massage him, because he's massaged every day, has been all his life, well, since he was 13 months from the Peto. And then they dress him and take him down for breakfast.
In a funny way, it must get harder the bigger and older he is, because you can't lift him very easily.
Yeah, but I mean, because of all the stuff we've done at the Peto, I believe, and Emily, my wife, believes, he's strong, and so he can hold his own weight. So one of my theories in the book is, if you really try to give people as much independence as they can, and for John that's meant being able to hold his own weight, and I often talk about toilet independence, whether he can go to the toilet by himself. That gives them dignity, and it also actually means it's easy to care for them. We don't have hoists and lifts and that. And although we were advised for him to be in a wheelchair, he rarely goes in a wheelchair unless we're going on a train or something. And we try to get him to walk using walkers, using sticks, using our arm. Favourite forms of exercise are on a tricycle. He has this lovely tricycle, and swimming, lots of swimming. So keeping him strong is actually great for us, because it means you don't have to lift him. We can get him to lift himself. So you have to be careful. I mean, occasionally, if you do it too quickly, you end up putting your back out. But if you do it properly, you can move him around. And obviously, the weekends, we don't have my wife and I do all the caring at the weekend.
And how is it different being a carer for your child and being a carer for your mum?
Well, I mean, it was totally different, really. I mean, my mum was dying, and it was really sad. And and it was also a relationship where there was adult conversation, and I could see my mum thinking about my future. So that's very different from looking after John, and there's no sadness in my relationship with John, right? He's great fun, and I like the games we play with each other. I mean, they may seem a bit mundane to other people, but it's part of our relationship. And he's a very happy boy, really happy boy, very smiley. So it's not the sad relation, just the sad caring, as it were. But equally, I can't have an adult conversation with him. So it is very, very different. And of course, it's for life. And, you know, my mum, interestingly, you could see her thinking about what was going to happen to me. So I'd gone on a trip to Germany with the school for sort of 2-3 days and come back, and we were on a coach, and we'd stopped in some car park somewhere in the Rhineland, and we got talking to these German girls who were in their coach in the same car park, and I had my photograph taken with this young girl about my age at the time, 14. And when we developed it, because it was, you know, Kodak developed pictures, old money, Mum looked at it and said, I wonder who you'll end up with.
Yeah.
And for me, I think about what's going to happen to John when I'm not there.
Yeah.
And this is one thing that many people may not realise is, you know, when you're caring with someone who's got a life condition, you're thinking about what does the future hold and how do you plan for that. And it's scary. I mean, Emily can hardly talk about it because it's quite emotional, because no one's going to love John, hold John like we do. There are great carers out there, but he's our son, right? And then there's the issue about my daughter, who's 11, and sibling carers, young sibling carers. It's a really interesting and sensitive category, because she's already beginning to ask the odd question about, will I be looking after John in the future?
Right. How old is she now?
She's 11.
Okay.
So sibling carers, you know, they have potentially a life of caring, which they didn't ask for. And there's an amazing charity called SIBS, and they give advice and help and guidance and support for sibling carers, young sibling carers, adult sibling carers. And, you know, at some stage we'll have to deal with the fact about we won't be there.
God, that's tough.
And also, how do we make sure Ellie can live her life and doesn't feel that that's her life?
So you've had this morning with John and Ellie, and you then go into the House of Commons. Does it just feel like a complete mismatch between your role as a carer and then the sort of cynicism of politics? How do you sort of somehow look at it and think this is just so pathetic when you've got PMQs or, you know...
I think we all do, don't we? Yeah,
How do you handle that kind of contrast?
I have a job to do, and that's to represent the values that I and my party have. And I think they've never been more important. And my job is to win for those values and for my party to win more seats and have more influence to be able to implement those values, whether it's about caring or whether it's about our relationship with Europe, whether it's about allowing people to be nicer to each other.
Do you think your role as a carer does inform your politics in this, not in terms of policy about carers, but does it give you an empathy, or does it give you a sort of determination to change things in some way? Or
I think both of those.
Yeah.
I mean, empathy is definitely something that you develop as a carer. Indeed, there's academics who look at young carers, and there's a guy called Saul Becker, Professor Saul Becker, and he and others have noted that young carers seem to develop 3 characteristics, and this is generalization. One is greater empathy, one is greater resilience, and another is great time management. And so I think I have some empathy, and I like to feel that when I'm dealing with my constituents in my advice surgeries and dealing with their problems, because I do a lot of face-to-face advice surgeries as well as on Zoom, and you're not only taking the constituents' concerns properly, because that's your job, but hopefully I exhibit empathy and they can see that I do care. What was the rest of the question, empathy?
Just the characteristics, and I think there's something, so many of the people that I've interviewed over the years who, successful politicians, but also actually successful business leaders or authors, they've had some kind of trauma or adversity that they've overcome in childhood. Do you think there is something about politics that it either attracts people who've had some kind of trauma, or that that adversity drives you on? So you think of Keir Starmer, his mother was very sick as well. Angela Rayner, her mother had bipolar. Tony Blair, his father had a stroke. There's so many people in politics and beyond. Why is that?
I don't know. There's certainly a PhD thesis out there to be written. I mean, I think empathy is a good thing for a politician. I think resilience is a good thing for a politician. Do you want to change? I mean, I do want to change the world, absolutely. I mean, actually, the biggest thing that drove me into politics originally wasn't care. It was the environment. I was taking a year off in school, university, traveling around Europe, hitchhiking, working, doing various things. And I read a book called Seeing Green by Jonathan Porritt. And that completely changed my perspective on the world. I then read lots of other books on environmentalism, went up to university and joined Freshers Fair, the student ecology group. There was 4 of us, and my first bit of political spin was to rechristen it Green Action. And one of the many reasons I ended up joining the Liberal Democrats, Paddy Ashton was rather important in this. And I joined when we were 4% in the opinion polls, so it wasn't a career move. But was because Simon Hughes and Paddy Ashdown were the only national politicians I could see who were talking seriously about the environment. And I had become by then a sort of intellectual liberal as well. And so it was a natural step to join the party. So why did I lost my thread. Where was it?
Do you think it's harder to be a party leader or a carer?
In a way, being a carer is dependent on what the caring situation is. So looking after my son, it's fine. Yes, it's got some tough parts of it. I can talk a lot about poo if you want to, which isn't the most pleasant part, but it's part of it. But it's my son. Look, my mother was a different kettle of fish, because although I had a great relationship, it was traumatic. So I'm not trying to avoid the question like a politician, but it does depend which caring role you're talking about. And you write in the book actually that caring is how we know we're alive. It's almost something instinctive in humanity. Yeah. So I mean, I hope the message is coming through that I don't want any sympathy, right? I've been lucky, but I haven't chosen that. I didn't choose, my parents said I didn't choose my wife to have MS and so on. I've chosen to be a party leader, so arguably that's easier because it's something I have chosen to do. And I enjoy it. I mean, if I'm honest with you, I'm having loads of fun at the moment. All those bungee jumping trips. Well, it's not so much the bungee jumping and the paddleboarding, all that stuff. That is fun, actually. It's making our case and winning people over. Yeah. I think we have a historic opportunity. I mean, I hope this is a political plug, so sorry if you're not a Liberal Democrat here, but we got our best result for 100 years last July. We've got some amazing colleagues now. I think the way politics is fragmenting and the way the 2 big parties are losing support, I think there's a huge opportunity for us. Yeah. And my job is to steer the party to take that opportunity for our values. I think people may be surprised by how well we do in the next election. I'm going to open up to questions in a moment, but I just want to ask you one political question, which is, yeah, of course.
What do you learn from the experience of being in coalition? How would you do it differently? Because this fragmented political landscape it basically makes it much more likely that we might have another coalition. And I know you're not going to say whether you'd join a coalition or not, but what would you do differently if the circumstances were that there was a sort of coalition situation after an election?
Well, let me talk about the coalition that was. I think you've got to make sure that you are less naive and more realistic about your coalition partners, because I don't think we were. I was probably one of the ones who was a little bit more cynical about them, and had quite a few battles because they didn't want the green agenda. When I was Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change, I could tell that they were trying to stop me.
The green crap.
The green crap, and so I played pretty hardball. And some of my Lib Dem ministerial colleagues did as well. But I think overall, we were a bit too trusting.
The Rose Garden press conference with Nick Clegg and David Cameron.
Whatever you want to put in that that particular bowl. But I think you've got to realise that they're not your friends.
Right.
And you've got to fight for your... And one thing I said after the election, because I was obviously a loyal team player during the government, because I think you just have to be, you've got to try and make it work, even though it's pretty tough. I did say after the election that if you're in the middle of the road, you'd better be visible. And I don't think we showed our distinctive position enough. Who we were, and who we are, and what we want to achieve, and why we're different. And we could and should have done that more, in my view. And I think you've got to be true to yourself and your values, your whole. And if people can't see that, then don't be surprised if they punish you.
Does anyone have any questions or comments or observations? Yes, I think we've got a microphone coming around. And please do share your own experiences as well, if you have them.
I have a question about another kind of care, which is about care homes.
Oh,
I just wanted to get your perspective on that and how we can improve them, because I'm sure everybody has an experience. I know a family member that's had a bad experience in one, and you hear some awful stories, and there are some great carers out there at care homes. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, how we can improve it, and also how that then impacts sort of, the NHS as well, and the bed blockers, which I hate that term, but I just want to get your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think when it comes to the care profession, and I talk about care professionals because a lot of my thesis in the book is about family carers, and it's those who've excluded from the debate, and I think that's a massive mistake. And if we're going to reform social care, you've got to start with the millions who are doing the other care. But care professionals, first of all, they're not paid anywhere near enough. And we argued at the election that there should be a special new minimum wage, higher than the national wage, just for carers, because we need to persuade more people to go into that profession. And then we need to have a Royal College of Care Workers. We need accreditation, we need to value, we need a care register. Lots of different things to show that this is a proper profession on a par with the health service. And unless we value it, guess what? We're not going to value care. Yeah. And that's answering your question in care homes, because if you talk to care home owners, as I do, one of the things they struggle with is having enough carers to work. It's their biggest challenge, really. What else do I say about care homes? I mean, we often think about elderly care homes. I want to move the agenda on to care homes for adults of working age and young people with learning disabilities. And I feel particularly passionate about this, and think there's more reform that we need in that area, because the state has removed itself from that area by and large, and it's not a terribly competitive market. And local authorities are paying through the nose to a lot of care home providers for that demography, often run by private equity firms. And these people are making 25%, 30% returns, paying tax offshore, and because there's not enough provision, they're fleecing the taxpayer. Now, some of the care may be good, some of it may not be so good, but I think in that area, which is a part of care which is not talked about, it's we often, and understandably, talk about elderly care, but there's a big part of our population who aren't ever going to have to work. My son will never be able to work. Where's he? Is he going to be in a care home? I mean, I have plans about where my son's going to be. I won't share them with you tonight, but he's going to be okay because I'm going to make sure of that. But I've also, as a politician, got to think about all those other people and how they looked after and how can we afford to look after them better. And I think the current model of care homes in that sector is absolutely broken.
So there's a question here.
Hi, I'm Sam. I have a daughter who went to Beadlesford in your constituency.
Oh, right, yes.
She's now in that position where we're trying to get long-term care for her, which has been an absolute nightmare, which I won't go into now. I have a mum who's dying of Alzheimer's, basically. So, yeah. But my question is, well, two questions, if I may. The first one is EHCPs. We think they're going to get rid of EHCPs, which are education, health and care plans for young people, disabled young people. The government hasn't denied that's happening. Where will the Liberal Democrats stand on that? Because the C of that is care, and it's a really crucial part of young people like my daughter, like your son. And the second question is, we go wheelchair skating, so we'd love you to come with John. Because I want to see you on a pair of roller skates, and I'd love to see John out skating.
Okay, well...
Can you explain what wheelchair skating is?
Oh, we go rollerblading. We push...
With the wheelchair?
Really fast, and my daughter loves it, but it's adults and it's adult wheelchair users and volunteer skaters.
Where do you do that?
Battersea Park, so it's not far.
Yeah. Well, I'm up for trying. I'm not great on roller skating.
He may bring his windsurfer with him.
Yeah, there's stunting, isn't there? Yeah, well, I'll definitely do it. The serious question, EHCPs. Well, I am worried about what they may do, but we also have to think about how we ensure that children and young people who need the care and education and health get it. But we also have to realise that there is some real financial challenges to make sure we do it right. And I would say there are two things I'd want to do to try to preserve the overall shape of EHCPs. The first actually goes back to my last answer. I think there are parts of the way we look after some of our young people that are ridiculously expensive, and the quality doesn't justify it because of what I've just described. I also think there's another part of that where the special education schools, both residential and day, have just mushroomed up in different places without any plan. And so there's a lot of money spent taking children, young people to the schools, huge amounts on transport, for send transport.
It's £1 billion a year for taxis.
It's massive. And if we planned it better, that wouldn't... And it's not great for a send child to be in a coach or a car, taxi, for an hour each way. I mean, that's doesn't make sense educationally, health, for the young people, for the taxpayer. So I think there's some stuff we can do around getting that model better, where you'd actually end up with better care at a lower cost. The other thing is early intervention, which for some children, I don't think it would help necessarily with your daughter's care or my son's care. Can I be a bit management consulty for a second?
Briefly.
Yeah. I'll probably get told off for doing this. In my mind, when I think about the problem, if I was a minister, I would have incidents of a condition and costs of a condition to really think through how I manage this. So you've got low incidence and low cost, high incidence and low cost, high cost, low incidence, high cost, high incidence. Think about those four different groups. And if through early intervention you can make sure those high incidence, low cost young people, children, get their condition sorted as much as possibly can be, and the parents trained at a really early stage, they can be mainstream in a way that they often don't end up being because there's no early intervention, right? So it's really better for them. And then they may not need EHCPs. I mean, if they do, they should get one. But, you know, we'd rather our children didn't have needed EHCPs, right? But they do. But if we can, through early intervention, help some people not need them, then we should do that as well. And the system, I mean, it just drives me crazy. You know, sometimes I had to fight for physicians to get just an assessment when it's really obvious that the child needs to be assessed, but they're on a 2-year waiting list for assessment. And, you know, that means you can't have an intervention. Mm. So the system just isn't working. So I hope they don't take a sledgehammer to EHCPs. That would be a huge mistake. But could we do better for our children and young people? Yes, we could. And there should be a whole set of reforms. I could go on about how I think the system isn't working well, and it's not working well for parents and families. Does that ring any bells to you, or have I worried you?
It does. I think what I think most parents are worried about is the removal of legal rights, because that's what comes with the HCP. And I think you're right. I think a lot of parents, you know, don't want to go through that fight. No one wants to be doing mountains of paperwork, which is what it involves. But if you take those away, what are they going to replace that with? And there's going to be a bridge between whatever happens, whatever is existing now, and what they want to put in place, and that will take years. As we know from 2014, it took years.
Yeah, we went from statements to EHCPs. Yeah. I mean, there needs to be, let me be clear, there needs to be something with legal rights, for sure. That's not a question. How that is administered and delivered, I mean, if Emily was here and talking about EHCPs, she'd be doing a nut about them. Not that she still wants the system, but the way they're administered.
We've got one more question. Time for one more question, Lily. You choose.
Maybe 2.
Oh, 2. Okay.
I'll keep my answers shorter.
I've gone from able-bodied to disability overnight through either ruptured brain tumour and stroke. What I'd like to know is, what are the chances of having things like the local government ombudsman improved? They've got a 98% bad rating on Trustpilot. I've dealt with them, and I'm a former litigator. I found it hell on earth dealing with them. There must be a better way to make the local government ombudsman accountable and the councils accountable. I do not think for one moment it is finance whatsoever in my case. I lived in Croydon. I didn't get a grab rail for 11 years. That is how bad it is. And this is a case known to the leader, CEO downwards, and the press. I'm far from alone on that. That has to be improved. The LGO is not fit for purpose, and that needs to go and change. And I'd like to know what your views on that are.
Well, I've dealt with the LGO for constituents on a few occasions. I have to say it's been a mixed experience. Sometimes it's been okay, sometimes it's not been okay, and maybe some of the experiences that you've had are reflected in those experiences. What I'm concerned about is the treatment that you've had that's made you go to the LGO, and one of the reasons we need reform of social care is so that things that are actually really easy to do get done, right? So adapting people's homes, putting a grab rail, is like peanuts. It's basic, and it gives people independence. And why is it so difficult to do that? But sometimes you end up spending huge amounts of money later on for care that if you'd actually looked after the person and gave them independence, enabled them to look after those which they prefer, it would have been cheaper. So I think that when I talk about early intervention with young people, I actually think with people who are experiencing mobility problems or illnesses and so on, let's get in quickly and work out how they and their family would like some support to enable them to live in their homes longer. And there's so many different anecdotes I could talk about that enable people to do what they want to do, be in their own home, look after themselves, have their family look after them so they don't have to go into care homes and have more expensive care, so they have better lives at low cost. I mean, why aren't we doing that?
Okay, Lily.
I'll be as quick as I can. Thank you so much. Well, thank you for sharing, first of all, because it's a very sensitive story, clearly. I share a lot of similarities in the way in which you speak about being an unpaid carer. I was an unpaid carer for my mum before she passed away. And being an unpaid carer, family carer, sorry, you know, I identified, now I look back, the lack of support in a lot of areas. And now that I can kind of talk about it without crying, I kind of turned my pain into an initiative that I founded, Carer Love, in which I've identified with the community of carers that every situation for carers is very unique, and the support system is very one-size-fits-all. So it's about meeting carers where they are, personalising their experience and being able to deliver personalised wellness plans. So that's what I've been doing. Question. So the question is, you know, you've got such a powerful, you know, platform and presence to be able to, work with support systems and kind of tackle that. Be really interesting to know kind of what are your kind of initiatives so far? Do you support any? That's my question.
First of all, thank you for that question, and thank you for Carer Love. I want to hear more about it. It sounds fantastic, and there is a chapter in my book which talks about the changes I think family carers need, drawing not just from my own experience, from other people's experiences, but from carer organisations, Carers Trust, Carers UK, SIBS, and so on. And I guess the carers organisation I've dealt with most is the one in my constituency called Kingston Carers Network, who look after young carers, but they also look after all different types of care situations, dementia care and so on. And working with them and supporting them is the sort of thing I would do in my constituency. And then increasingly Carers UK and Carers Trust and others have got me to do a few things. I like to work with people who really know what they're talking about, you know, and who are specialists. And it sounds like you are. Can I just want one sort of example from Kingston Carers Network, which sort of talks a little bit about other things we've mentioned. Just a simple thing that this voluntary organisation, this charity did in my constituency, which has helped lots of people. They had a number of people who were looking after their partners with dementia. And one of the things that when you're a dementia carer is you can be quite isolated, and you find all the systems quite difficult and complicated. And Kingston Carers Network said, why don't we link up all these dementia carers on a WhatsApp group? It cost nothing. And what happened was they started talking to each other, messaging each other, sharing advice and guidance. By the way, did you know you get this? Did you know you can find out how to fill this form in over there? And then they started meeting for lunch and for coffees, and they suddenly had a social group. And what happened was not only were they less isolated and their mental health improved, they got advice about how they could look after their loved ones, so their loved ones stayed out of care homes. And you see what I mean? These little things that a little voluntary group in my constituency did, just a simple little idea, helped lots of people, lots of carers, and had a great outcome. And so it sounds like your initiative has that sort of flexible approach, and that's what I really like. Community-based solutions, I talk a lot about that in the book.
Thank you so much. We're out of time, I'm afraid, but thank you so much, Ed, for sharing your story and for talking so powerfully about it all. Ed's book is available to buy at the back of the room, and he's kindly agreed to stay and sign copies if anyone wants that. And thank you so much to all of you for coming, and to those of you who've shared your own stories and experiences as well. It's been a fascinating and inspiring evening. So thank you to everyone.